welcome to this program. In this program we will look at various aspects of how from a traditional distance education delivery we could very successfully shift to an interactive multimedia based online distance learning delivery. Basically, I would like to differentiate between the traditional distance education delivery and the online distance learning delivery. Traditionally, we have been so far print, audio, video, interactive radio, teleconferencing, radio and television, sometimes multimedia, and also online learning standing apart from each other as we could call a supplementary or complementary integration of media. There have been learner support through the established study center system, and they have an assignments and projects in between to mediate between the teacher and the learners. Now, given this setup and the whole institutional mechanism geared towards this kind of a setup is well established, and there are models available in different open universities and different distance teaching institutions across the world, and within India also there have been variations within the traditional distance education delivery model. We will look at this program how, if at all, we have to shift from from this kind of a model to an interactive multimedia based online teaching and learning model. What kind of pedagogic, administrative, managerial and organizational preparations we have to make to successfully transit from that kind of a model to this model, or that kind of a delivery system to an interactive multimedia based distance learning delivery system without dismantling the structures of the traditional distance education delivery. My first slide to you is on interactive multimedia. If we are shifting from the traditional, can we see this slide please? If we are shifting from the traditional distance education to a distance education based on interactive multimedia, in fact one can use interactive multimedia within the traditional distance education delivery structure through what is called a CD-ROM. Usually, as we have been seeing, through cartoon films, which includes print, audio, video, graphics, animation, and if possible also some data, some kind of data transmission could also be possible through interactive multimedia CDs, and additional resources could also be made possible through this CD, including, say for instance, in Britannia, Encyclopedia Britannica can also be inserted into CDs which one can read through. Now you see this in transparency that this is about interactive multimedia. Interactive multimedia, as you will see, is neither hardware nor software, but it is certainly a teaching learning system. As we have been classroom teaching learning system, we have distance teaching learning system. Now interactive multimedia CD-ROM and the programs, audio, video, print, graphics, animation put together and getting into the CD-ROM. As we all know that we all see CDs for music, CDs for video, CDs for cartoon films for children, including Pokemon and others, and including Harry Potter and so on and so forth. Now if those kind of CDs would like to utilize for our distance teaching learning, of course CDs one can use in a very face-to-face situation if one has access to a computer or a PC, and almost all PCs today have CD-ROMs built into them, and therefore it would be easy if one has access to a PC at home, in office, or at any other place. Now interactive multimedia, as you will see, that it is neither hardware nor software as it is commonly believed, but it's certainly a new teaching learning system, and therefore design of interactive multimedia combining print, audio, video, graphics and animation is very important, and therefore instructional design for multimedia is the crucial issue in the use of this interactive multimedia, and therefore making a transition from the traditional distance education delivery to interactive multimedia based online distance education delivery. It is multimedia. Unlike TV or unlike computer based communication, it is multimedia network, and therefore it combines text, pictures, animation and audio. Now given this kind of a definition of multimedia or multimedia CD that we are going to use for our new distance education delivery, now let us look at the next transparency, that what kind of a pedagogic or andragogic shift that we have to make in the design of these multimedia. As you will see in this transparency, left hand side you have behaviorism and right hand side constructivism. The traditional behavioristic approach, we all know that stimulus response operant conditioning system of Professor B.F. Skinner, and the Skinnerian programming, traditional behavioristic design says that there must be a stimulus, there must be a response, and therefore the materials must be provided in chunks, and therefore there must be self-assessment questions, and immediately there must be feedback available to the student, whether the student is doing very good, is progressing very well, or else one can, if in a linear program, will go back to the same material. If it is a branching program, one will go back to other kinds of materials which will be available, as we call the Scrabble text. Now in this behavioristic model, you will see that if we go back to the transparency again, you will see that left hand side behaviorism and right hand side constructivism. Now constructivism is a kind of educational philosophy today which is coming up. Of course it was very much there, we have started recognizing it of late, which says that every human being has got certain things within oneself, that one has considerable experience by oneself, and one has certain styles of learning, and everybody has different styles of learning, and therefore what is needed is a learner-centered facilitation of learning, and therefore learning resources, and therefore every individual learner learns. The context is very important. Wherever I am, my context is important to me. I have grown up in the context, and therefore my mental framework or cognitive structure, the way I think, the way I perceive, will be determined by my context. This is precisely, and therefore everybody has got certain things within oneself which could be best utilized for one's own learning. If the learning stimulus that you are providing to me, if it is not facilitating my mental framework, my perception and my learning style, I will simply not learn as effectively as if you could provide or facilitate my learning style and my perception and my cognitive structure. This is precisely what constructivism talks about, and therefore the job of the teacher or the facilitator or the distance teacher is that we must facilitate the cognitive structure, the mental framework, the perception, and more particularly the learning style of each and every individual learner. Now if we go back to the transparency, you will find that left hand side you find, say, instructivist, whereas in constructivist philosophy it is constructivist. Now there is a considerable shift from instruction to construction. We must facilitate each individual to construct one's own knowledge. That instead of teacher providing materials, already available materials, we could provide materials to learners to read, to go through, to understand, to comprehend, and therefore construct their own meaning. There is a possibility that in a group situation, or what is called a community of practitioners, in a group learning situation, that one could negotiate the meaning with others, and therefore group learning is very important. So for instance, in behavioristic philosophy you have abstract, and we have to concretize in the constructivist philosophy, that anything abstract is not applicable, it is not appealing to the learner. We must concretize, we must very concretely say, with examples, with concrete at least ideation, with concrete imagination at least, even if it is in abstract form, that we must concretize that abstract form to say what exactly does it mean, so therefore one could relate to, and possibly it is better if one can relate to one's own context. If it is related to one's own context, environment, culture, then one would learn more effectively. 3. The traditionally behavioristic philosophy says that we must emphasize on master learning. We all know about master learning, the traditional program learning consideration of 90-90 criterion, that 90% of the students must be able to understand or comprehend 90% of the materials being taught. That is a past, that is an old story, but now what is coming up is, why not 100%, 100% of the students learning 100% of the materials? It is possible provided we facilitate each individual's learning. So instead of talking about master learning, what is being told today, that we must go for experiential learning, that everybody has got certain repository of experience. The experience is derived from the context, and if we start teaching the learners at a distance or even face to face, based on or in relation to their context, the learners will be learning better, and therefore we must address the experiential repository or repository of experiences of each learner, which are varied from each other. One's own experience is very different from the other person, the third person's experience is different from the second and first, and therefore towards the constructivist philosophy we must address each individual's experience, and that's a very important task. Therefore presumably that from a teacher-centered instructional strategy where the teacher has more control and learner has less control, in this kind of a constructive strategy we are providing more control to the learner. And therefore also that traditionally it was high goal orientation. We set the goals, we set the objectives, we try to achieve the instructional objectives. But in this constructivist kind of situation, it is almost unstructured, or it is very loosely structured. Structure is not as important as providing, facilitating each learner to explore the way one would like to explore the content, decide everything and proceed the way one would feel like. And therefore this stress is not on instructor but on facilitator. Traditionally we have seen that individual differences are very important. But in a behavioristic philosophy we always say that as far as possible we should reduce differences between human beings and therefore low individual differences, but in a constructive philosophy each individual is important and therefore there is a stress on high individual differences. If we go to the third transparency, now so far we have talked about what is interactive multimedia, and we have also seen that how from a pedagogy point of view we could shift from the behavioristic philosophy to a very constructivist philosophy, giving the responsibility of learning, the onus of learning to the learner, and therefore defining the instructor as the facilitator. Instructor will be facilitating. If we look at the transparency, now we are going to look at that what was happening in the traditional distance education delivery. As you could see in the transparency, in the traditional distance education delivery, there might be a course team, because team is very important, team of writers are very important, that there might be a single author course team as we had been having in the Correspondence Course Institute so far, or there could be a course team. In fact, sometimes the course team comprises of just one person from the faculty, from the headquarter faculty, and a varieties of people derived from different places within the state, within the country, and could join hands to form a course team, and therefore the course team would be acting at a distance. There might be course team like the British Open University, for instance. This course team is physically available. A large number of people participating in the course team are physically available in one meeting room, and therefore are in a better position to discuss themselves. So in any case, the point is that we need a course team, whether it is a one-person course team or it is a multi-person course team. Course materials are being developed, they are written, they are being edited by people, content editing, language editing, distance learning, instructional design editing, and so on and so forth, copy editing, translation if possible, and finally we make camera ready copy. Camera ready copy goes to press and we get the materials printed, and therefore printing is very important. So far printed materials are concerned. Similarly, whether it is a supplementary use or complementary use, or in any case if it is an integrated use of media, we need to produce audio and video programs, and therefore there are scripting, there are production, academic scripts, production scripts for audio and video also, and therefore programs are available. We need a setup to produce audio and video programs. If we go back to the transparency, we will see that for learner support, traditionally we have study center learner support system. Traditionally we have learner support based at the study center. There could be mobile learning center also. When we have web-based learning, we will discuss that how this concept is shifting from the study center based physical learner support system to a synchronous but asynchronous or any kind of but virtual learner support system, learner support at a distance. We have assignments, we have projects, we have hands-on experiments, so far computer is concerned, or laboratories and science programs, hospitals for nursing and doctors programs for surgery, and so on and so forth. So the hands-on will be different depending on the nature of the program. We evaluate assignments and final answer scripts and other projects, log books for instance in case of doctors, and so on and so forth, and finally award a degree. Therefore you would look at the transparency, you will find that the functional units would be admission, instructional design, graphics, editing, media production, computer, learner support, material distribution, examination, evaluation. It might vary from institution to institution. You could still think of many. Now, given this possibility that this is what is a traditional distance education system, and therefore the functions that we discussed would determine the kind of mechanisms that we would have: administrative mechanism, managerial mechanism, organizational structures, various units and divisions and schools, and so on and so forth, a network of regional center and study centers, and beyond study centers there could also be possibility of program study centers or even facilitators who are not working in a structured system called a study center, and so on and so forth. These are possibilities that we have, and we are fairly acquainted with a traditional distance education delivery. Now, if we would like to make, now here is a question. Now, if you look at the transparency, the question is that what advantages interactive multimedia has over print? Could you think of what advantages interactive multimedia will have over print? If still I will be facilitating you some points, you could still think of many. Now, look at these points, that what an interactive multimedia could do, which might be less possible in a traditional distance education delivery system, or some of the issues, some of the facilitations that multimedia can do may not at all be possible in a face-to-face situation. That number one, there is every possibility that there will be more stimulation, that whether it is through simulation, whether it is through role playing, whether it is through any other activities that could be designed, a host of activities which are not possible in a printed situation form, but could be possible in interactive multimedia, because you have the facility of animation and graphics, and therefore animation would be providing that. It could even animate activities which one could do physically face to face either, or in a very natural situation, but automatically within less time the facilities could be animated, and therefore the growth and development could be depicted. There will be more engagement insofar as multimedia is concerned. We could engage through activities, varieties of activities. In fact, these days a lot more games are coming up. As we know that children are playing games, and a Game Boy, for instance, Game Boy is nothing but full of games, very intelligent games actually, and Game Boy is getting so famous and therefore cheaper day by day. Now look at that Game Boy. If you translate, because that is meant for children, if you are designing games for children, say for instance management games and so on and so forth, these games could also be possible. Some way to engage learner. There is more possibility that we could engage learner. There is every possibility of more practice. If you could go back to the transparency please, that there is every possibility of practice, more practice is possible, other than of course in a face-to-face situation. Can we go back to transparency please? If in a face-to-face situation there is more possibility of practice, but at a distance there is less possibility unless one comes to study center. One is not regularly coming to study center, and almost every day study center is not open. Now, little importantly, if you go a little further, more resources are available. For instance, we could at the most add a handout or an extra reading material with copyright permission or whatever requirements are possible to add new learning resources to the blocks or modules or courses, and it was very costly. One takes time to determine that, but there is a costing model available for that. Now here is a CD-ROM, enough space, lot of space, and therefore one could give, even to the extent as I said earlier, even Encyclopedia Britannica could also get into a CD-ROM. Thousands of pages, thousands of activities, thousands of graphics and models, and a lot many audio and video can get into. Unlike online learning, a lot more audio and video can get into that. So therefore, lot many resources can go in, and 3D is possible. A three-dimensional display, it is possible. For instance, in case of say doctor's program, that operation of the brain, one could look at from one side only. In a video program one can still do 3D, and that video 3D can get into jolly well into a CD-ROM, which might be difficult to bring that in, as we'll see a little later, to bring that in an online learning situation unless enough bandwidth is available. More activities and therefore more experiential learning. As we said, that if activities could be designed to the context and learning style of the learner, that if we can address the existing repository of experience of each learner, one will feel more motivated to do that activity. Varieties of learning style could be addressed through multimedia, and of course the control of learning goes to the learner. Now the learner by himself or herself will be in a position to handle the CD. Now depending on one's own pace of learning, depending on the way one would like to proceed, the path of learning, one can handle the CD the way one could. It could be linear, the design could be linear, or at the most the design could be branching. It could be made more complex beyond linear branching. It could be modeled in such a way that one could proceed in many directions, not only 1, 2 or 3. There could be many possibilities of proceeding in the learning path in the interactive multimedia program. And therefore there is every possibility that we could provide more problem based learning situations, more problem solving, and there is a possibility that we could provide in immediate feedback immediate feedback is possible, that you could give a self-assessed question and one could do that, and a series of self-assessment questions one can do, and finally one could at each stage of learning one can get a feedback that how one has done, what is the score, what feedback one could receive. Of course, all these need to be programmed beforehand, and therefore these all need to be designed. Now, abstract concepts could be made more concrete through simulation, and simulation role plays are possible, and therefore you will see that there is every possibility of user control, user interface, and therefore there is little possibility of deep learning. If we come back to the question again, the earlier question was that what was the role of interactive multimedia. Now, given the situation that this interactive multimedia, as we have seen, that there is certainly, you will find certain changes from the traditional print based or audio based or video based programs, and therefore there are design issues. Now, if there is a question, if we go back to the transparency, that what changes would be needed if we shift from the traditional distance education delivery to the multimedia based distance education delivery. Now, we are not talking about online, we are talking about a CD-ROM based interactive multimedia based distance education delivery. You will see in the transparency that two things I have noted, that design and development team, the delivery, that what differences we can make in design and development as well as in delivery. You will find that in design and development that we will have, of course, the researchers, content specialists, script writers, instructional designers, graphic artists, audio and video producers, programmers, program coordinators, hardware and software. Could you see any difference between the traditional distance education delivery and multimedia distance education delivery? You will find that different kinds of people are coming in, the functions remaining the same. Of course, you need hardware and software, but the functions remaining the same. You need instructional designers because the instructional design is to be done. You need script writers because script is needed. You need people who would be doing need analysis and so on and so forth. You need researchers. You need content specialists who would be writing these as they were writing course units. But if you go back to the delivery, you will find a difference. Now, earlier we had been using post. Here also we can use the postal system to send the or the courier to send the CD-ROM to the learners. But we need a PC with a CD-ROM player. We need the CD-ROM courseware. There will be different units which will be built, which should be developed, maybe a lab, maybe a multimedia lab, the programming lab, and so on and so forth. These all are needed. We still need the audio production, we still need the video production. Of course, we do not need the huge structure of audio and video production as we would be needing if audio and video programs are still used supplementary or complementary or in an integrated fashion in the traditional distance education delivery. In the multimedia, interactive multimedia distance education delivery, of course, audio and video are integrated, but the use of audio and video was reduced to such an extent and will be compensated by graphics and animation to a considerable extent that we do not need a large set of audio and video studios as we have been having in traditional distance education delivery. We still need student registration, we still need student evaluation, we still need learner support, we still need hands-on instruction. The difference that we will have is that the traditional print and audio video which are standing apart as supplementary, complementary, will be integrated into a platform called interactive multimedia. If we go further, let us ask again the same question. If we go back to the transparency, you will see there that the question is, what additional advantages web-based or online learning has over interactive multimedia? Now the question is, what is after all web-based learning and online learning, and therefore what difference it would make if we are not using interactive multimedia CD-ROM, where of course using interactive multimedia but not the CD-ROM, and therefore interactive multimedia will now be available on the web. As we know traditionally in web-based learning, that in virtual learning, learning is taking place at a distance, of course. Content is to be designed, is to be thrown on into what is called a website. Once the website is ready, the website is a virtual site somewhere not visible to anybody unless one accesses that. And one downloads print, one downloads the website. One downloads audio and video, whether video or audio on demand, or video and audio as part of the website program, and so on and so forth. one is downloading that and one could see the site, but site is an invisible site. Now this is virtual, therefore the virtual learning. Now so far this web-based learning is concerned, we prepare content, content need to be designed, content need to be integrated, we need interactive multimedia, print, audio, video, graphics, animation to integrate that into what is called an interactive multimedia content, because this is interactive. It is not only multimedia, this is also interactive. These are available on the web. What additional facilities, because exclusively we are now going from a traditional distance education delivery to a fully non-traditional online based or web based distance education delivery. Whatever we could think of, starting from advertisement and admission to the award of degree, all the activities will be taking place online. This is a very fantastic situation, but it's very difficult really to do that. I mean, one could still decide to go for an exclusive online distance education delivery. What is coming up, of course, we will conclude saying that what is coming up is a different kind of situation, that to go exclusive online has many issues to address because of cost effectiveness, because of the problem of access, because of a variety of problems of instructional design itself, pedagogic, administrative, organizational, costing, and so on and so forth. Issues need to be addressed. But even if one addresses these issues, or if one is able to solve these problems and therefore decides that one would be going for online learning, what additional advantages that one would be having insofar as that is concerned. Now let us go to the transparency and see that what could be possible. That online over interactive multimedia, as you will see, that there will be more possibility of collaborative engagement. Now here is a question of engagement and there is a question of collaboration. In interactive multimedia, unlike a face-to-face situation, interactive multimedia had less collaboration. One at the most will be talking to oneself and with the teacher who is built into those media, and maybe through games to a varieties of different other learning objects within quote, other learning objects which are available through interactive multimedia, and there is every possibility of engagement. We'll also see, second point, that student-student and student-tutor interaction will increase, and therefore interactivity will increase. Interactivity and interaction are two different things. Interaction, to what extent we are ensuring interaction. Interactivity, that facilitating interaction. All these mechanisms that would be facilitating interaction. So interactivity will increase, interaction will increase, collaboration will increase, engagement will increase. So interaction and engagement, two very important pillars of learning in a face-to-face situation, would be very much possible in an online learning situation, which may not be possible as much in an interactive multimedia CD-ROM situation. If we go back to the transparency again, we'll see that there will be more possibility of student activity, because we could interact, the next point, synchronous and asynchronous. That we can interact at the same point of time irrespective of time differences between nations, between countries, or even between continents. That we at the same point of time, it may be 9 o'clock morning somewhere, it may be 9 o'clock evening elsewhere, but we could at the real point of time, same point of time, then and there we could interact, and therefore this is synchronous. Asynchronous, as we have been using emails for instance, that we interact, we communicate, but the communication doesn't reach immediately to the person. Even if it reaches immediately, one is not immediately responding to that, for instance email. So therefore in a discussion forum for instance, that the teacher might give a question, or all the students will be reacting one by one, one today, two students tomorrow, three next day, and so on and so forth. At the end of the week, that we have all the responses of the students. Now we can read through, we can reflect. This is what is called an asynchronous, which is not at the real point of time, which can be after the first communication. So therefore and if you look at the transparency again, there is every possibility of instant feedback, intelligent flexible feedback, that if we can program, we can provide feedback as and when possible. Online learning is possible, interaction is possible, mentoring or tutoring is possible, collaboration, knowledge construction, negotiation, assignments, evaluation, feedback, and finally certification is possible. And therefore if you go to the last transparency and the final one, that what changes would be needed if we go from a traditional distance education delivery vis-a-vis interactive multimedia and to online learning. You will see for both design and development as well as delivery. In design and development, you will find as in interactive multimedia all kinds of possibilities we need, because we are using interactive multimedia. So there could be single online teacher, there must be collaborative online and offline development. So by saying that online, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is possible online. We can generate content online, but a lot of content can be generated offline. So therefore, saying that online is in fact not the case. Online is many times offline, because content could be generated offline, can be uploaded online, even content can be generated online. Discussion could take place online, but reflection might take place offline. And therefore, if you look at the transparency again, that the delivery could be on the web, and therefore we would like to call this a blended delivery. That in an online offline situation, what is coming up is a blended delivery. I will conclude this program saying that if we are shifting from a traditional distance education delivery to a new, modern, upcoming, progressive, web-based online distance education delivery, what would be more important for us to consider is organizational, administrative, managerial, pedagogic possibilities that we have discussed so far, and therefore it would be prudent on our part, so far cost and other considerations are concerned, more particularly pedagogic considerations, that it would be better, more effective if we go for a blended learning situation, combining all the possibilities that we have discussed. Thank you.